Cancel clear. Today we're discussing the art and urgency of strengthskeeping, the Sonya Tinsley hook. And we're going to discover what strengthskeeping means. Now more than ever, we need people who help us stay connected with our strengths, the inner resources we each have that help us survive, thrive, and successfully navigate life's challenges. I'm going to be interviewing Sonya today. She's the founder of All Our Strengths, and we're going to talk about what it means to be a strengths keeper in these challenging times and how we can encourage this practice, not only in ourselves, but in our families, our partnerships, our communities, and our organizations. Sonya is a coach with a passion for helping people know, grow, and show their own strengths. As the founder of All Our Strengths, her mission is to teach people how to become strengths keepers in their schools, families, communities, and organizations so that everyone's strengths can be nurtured and people can work together more effectively. And now more than ever, that is so important. Sonya is passionate about supporting positive changes in our schools and helping our communities focus on their strengths. She has a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in psychology and leadership coaching. Welcome to the call, Sonya. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. It's fun. I'm so often attending these, and I've learned so much, and so it's fun to be on the other side now.
Well, we're delighted to have you here and so honored to have you here. How are you affiliated with the Wholebeing Institute?
Probably the way many of the folks who are on the call right now are, just as a wonderful resource for helping me grow as a positive psychology practitioner, and so appreciating all the resources that you're offering right now, but also over the years of just taking advantage of these wonderful things that you offer that help us learn and grow. So that's my main thing, and delighted that I made the connection with Phoebe, who invited me to be a part of this, and so this is wonderful. I'm excited.
Well, your enthusiasm and your spirit is infectious. So I'm excited to hear what strengthskeeping is. Is this something that you have created, and can you tell us more about it?
So, strengthskeeping really is just a term I have coined, and just so grateful to the work of the VIA Institute, because all of this work is based on the science of character strengths and using that survey. And it's one of those things I just felt so life-changing for me that I started thinking, well, how do we get this to everyone? How can everyone, have this? If there was a way to attach it to babies, when they come home from the hospital, I would, because I just think this work is so important for what people need to grow and to flourish and to help us do good things in the world. And so really strengthskeeping, and I'll say more about it as I start sharing the slides, is just about how do we make sure that happens? What are the practices that we use to make sure that people do learn about their strengths and do see strengths in one another.
Beautiful. It's almost like, how do we put this into practice, and also how do we help it grow?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you have a slideshow. Do you want to give us some context about it, and then we'll talk about it?
Well, I think I might jump right in if that's okay. Is that okay? Okay, and so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I'm in the right view. Okay, and so today we're just going to talk about the art and urgency of strengthskeeping. We're going to get off this slide because you don't really need to see my picture right now. So let me advance that, make sure I'm in the right place. Can everyone see the slides? There we go. So just starting off here, this is the slide that the image that you see when you go to the All Our Strengths website. The world needs all our strengths, and part of the reason, for me, that's the touchstone of everything that I do, because really, I just feel this so deeply and truly, that we each have something that the world needs, that is expressed through our strengths. And it's just so important for us to be helped to offer that, to not just hope that people figure out their strengths and are able to offer it, but that they're actually helped to do that. I think that one day we are really going to be amazed that we ever tried to raise kids, teach kids, manage people, lead people, marry people without knowing their strengths, without leveraging their strengths. I think um, it's really going to be something like now the way we look back at things like hand washing. How did we ever not know that, you know? And so I feel like in terms of our mental health and our psychological development, that strengths are similar, that we're really going to be amazed that that was not our starting point all of the time whenever we're trying to cooperate or work together or make something positive happen in the world. So with that being said, I'm just going to jump right in to strengthskeeping a little bit more and what that means. So go back to the slideshow. Thanks for
Great.
your patience.
And the slideshow is so beautiful. I just love that your creativity and art here.
Thank you. Well, I have a friend, her name is Laura Belamovitz, who's a fantastic graphic designer, and it always interprets my love of color into this work. So I always say, you know, she makes me look a whole lot better. So anyway, our questions for today: what is strengthskeeping? Why is strengthskeeping important? Where do we need strengthskeepers? Who can be a strengthskeeper? You know, how does one even begin strengthskeeping? And then when should we practice strengthskeeping? Is there a right time and place? And Caroline figured, you know, this out right away. She was on to me that our structure is right out of third grade language arts class. Who, what, why, when, where, and how. So hopefully by the end of this, you will have a sense of these things in relation to strengthskeeping. So let's talk about what is strengthskeeping. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you this. Well, I'm not, because I don't want you to read ahead. So we know strengths as our inner resources, those positive qualities that we've already talked about that we each have inside. Positive psychology researchers have developed this list of 24 universally valued strengths, and we know that each of us, we each have all 24, but yet we also have 5 to 7 of those 24 that are the ones that we rely on the most often, that really shine through in us. And those are our signature strengths. And we're talking about those qualities like bravery, creativity, leadership, love, really the things people do all around the world, anywhere in the world, when they are trying to be their best selves. The other thing, though, that we know, as wonderful as strengths are, and now we have this wonderful tool, the VIA Character Strength Survey, that helps us. It's freely available, youth version, adult version, you know, takes just a few minutes to help you figure out your signature strengths. In spite of all the tools and resources that we have, we forget to use our strengths all the time. And that we even includes people who are strengths coaches, people who are counselors and therapists, people who really love this work because we're human. And it's just really difficult for us to keep all the important things we have going on top of mind. Strengths can get lost in the background. And I tie so much of what I do to lessons I learned in my community as a mom, as a PTA president, and really being involved in my local school community. Because one of the lessons I learned there is that if you want something done, it has to be someone's job. So we really can't hope that someone brings refreshments or hope that someone will remember to facilitate the meeting. We plan for it, and we create sign-up sheets. We make sure that all the important roles are covered. And so I think a lot of us talk about in our organizations and in our communities how important strengths are, but we go back to just hoping that people will remember that. And so I like to use the example, imagine if, we all know that in an organization or any endeavor, keeping track of the money is really important. But imagine if we treated that the way that we often treat strengths. So that would look like, maybe I'll have a workshop at the beginning of the year on the importance of keeping track of finances, and maybe I'll have some people do some team building exercises about how to track receipts and keep track of money. And then everyone will be really excited about it. And then for the rest of the year, I'm just going to hope that they do that. I'm going to hope that they keep track of expenses. I'm going to hope that they plan well to use the funds wisely. You know, we don't do that. We know right from the beginning, we need a treasurer. We need someone to take notes. We need that all-important hospitality chair to make sure the refreshments show up. And so really all I'm asking us to think about in terms of strengths keeping is to apply that same type of thinking to strengths, because we know strengths are essential to people being energized, engaged, motivated, thriving, to being able to work well together. So because we know how important strengths are, why don't we take this opportunity to just make sure that that people are paying attention to that? So just to recap, I'm just going to show you then the last piece of that summed up here. Here we go. So what is strengths keeping? It's basically combining those two things, strengths being the inner resources that we have inside of us to help us survive and thrive, handle life's challenges. And then keepers are people who have the job of taking care of something important. And so we all know this already in our lives. We have timekeepers, housekeepers, peacekeepers, anytime goalkeepers in sports. So we know that things that are important have to be guarded and monitored and protected to make sure that they happen. And so that is what strengths keeping is. It's bringing that same energy to this idea of strengths, making sure that the people in our community of concern recognize and remember the strengths in themselves, but really just as importantly, in each other. So I'll pause there if that.
I think that's amazing to consider and to think about. You know, it's like I hear so often that people will take the character strengths survey and then they're not really sure how to apply it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, oh, that's nice that I have these accessories, right?
Yeah.
That I can talk about but how do I actually apply them?
Right.
And then to have the purpose. And I was thinking about when Hiller was talking on Tuesday, we were talking about resilience, and she said even having a little mini purpose every day and knowing what your kind of role was. Her role was to take care of her daughter. And those of you that missed that call, don't worry, we'll send you the recording. But her role was to be the cheerleader and the protector of her daughter when she was in the hospital. And I hear you saying that it's like, if my role, let's say as a leader of my team, is to be a strength keeper, then I'm going to make sure that we're circling back to everyone's strengths.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The same way that we wouldn't dream of having a meeting where we don't go over the minutes, look at our finances, what's the treasurer's report, all of these things. Imagine having strengths built in that same way into the work that we do together, that it's that important to make sure that each member of this community knows what their strengths are and is feeling like they're appreciated for those strengths and having the opportunity to contribute those strengths in the context of this community.
So this sounds fascinating, and I know you're going to say, because my next question is, okay, how do we do that?
How do we do that? Well, I'm trying to remember, is that what's next? Let's find out. So, and of course we'll be jumping around because I get excited and I start saying things at one point that I was going to say at another point. And so some of this we might have already touched on in terms of why is strengths keeping important. I think the main reason we've already said, we're human, we forget. But the other piece of this is that strengths are too important to be forgotten. And so hope is a wonderful strength. It's a wonderful character strength, but we don't want it to be our only strategy for hoping. We don't want to just hope that people are in touch with their strengths and are using them in our families and in our schools and our communities, in our neighborhoods. So
can we go back? I think Teresa wanted to see the slide one more time. Teresa, is it the one that was defining what is strengths keeping?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that she wanted to just see that one more time. And we'll give you a moment. You can even take a picture of this. And remember, you guys, we will be sending this out with the recording. So if you want to do that, thank you so much. That's great. And we can go on.
Yeah, and this idea of keeping is such an old idea in humanity, all the way to Cain and Abel, right? Am I my brother's keeper? This idea that there is a role to be played in taking care of something or someone important. And so I'm just really hoping, I'm inspired by this idea of seeing ourselves as people who take on that responsibility. And that's what I'm hoping to share today with you all.
Well, I was thinking about what Fred Rogers said, look for the helpers.
Yes.
And it's now like, look for the helpers, but also who are the keepers?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many, and the beautiful things about character strengths, there's so many ways to help. There's not one way to help, and our strengths help us help in all our special ways. You know, who reminds us to be forgiving? Who in this community reminds us to be kind? Who helps us to be brave? Who helps us to be prudent and make good choices? And so really, it's so wonderful and inspiring to tell people to help and to want to be helpers. But what I love about the whole science of character strengths and using the VIA character strength survey is it helps people figure out how they help and how they can help and how they'll be energized through helping. So I think we've really touched on why is strengths keeping important. You know, strengths are essential to our individual and collective well-being and resilience, but we're human. Can't say that enough. We're human. Strengths are too important to be left to chance. And I think this last point is worth focusing on. Strengths keeping has to be someone's job. And so you'll be hearing a lot of lessons from PTA today. But another lesson you learn pretty quickly is that if something is everyone's job, it's actually no one's job. And so if we're just going to hope that everyone remembers to bring something, you know, to the potluck or to whatever it is you're planning, then chances are you're either going to end up with nothing or you're going to end up with 7 desserts and, you know, a bag of chips. So it's really important for someone to have a defined role. And I think this very much applies to strengths keeping. A lesson I learned is from being a PTA co-president, I assumed that because I was already a strengths coach, that I had so many big ideas about how it's going to help people find volunteer opportunities that match their strengths. And everyone who's an officer is going to know their strengths. And we are going to incorporate this and we're going to do programs for parents about strengths. And, you know, we did do some of those things. But the other thing I learned is that I already had a job. And it was called being co-president, and it had a lot of responsibilities. And to be honest, even though I came into it as a strengths coach, sometimes I just didn't care about people's strengths. I just needed we just needed a fall festival chair. And we don't care if you're strengthened by it because we need it quickly, you know? And so you will find when you just assume that strengths keeping is something that can be thrown in with any role, that it might not happen, because even though you care about it very deeply, you get busy. And so the same respect that we give to those other things, like keeping track of minutes and keeping track of money, keeping track of the facilitating or decorating or whatever we're doing in our collective work together, recognizing that it's important enough that people know their strengths and are continually reminded to be using those and developing those, that's an important job. And so just like another form of keeping, housekeeping, we can all help with the job. We can all help the housekeeper. We can all help with housekeeping, but that still doesn't mean that it's not someone's job to monitor it and to make sure it's not being forgotten.
Great. Awesome.
So this is an easy one. Where do you think we need Strengthskeepers?
Everywhere. That's my guess.
Yes, that's right. Very good. Very good. So I like to say you only need to care about strengths if you care about people working well together, being engaged, being able to cooperate, collaborate, trust, and be in positive relationship. If you're in a situation where none of those things matter, then sure, don't think about strengths. But most of us, in one way or another, want people to be in that kind of space and to be giving us their best. And that's even true, you know, if I go to the store and make a return, I want that cashier or the person at the customer service desk to show me the strengths, you know, I want them to show me understanding. I want them to maybe take some leadership and say, oh, that's not, you know, that's just not my job, I can't help you. And so there's pretty much, whenever we're asking anything of anyone, we're hoping that they're showing one of those 24 strengths, at least one, probably several. And so really, we need strengths keepers everywhere, that we are trying to be together and work together in a positive way, because we really want people to be showing up with their strengths. So here's another trick question. Who can be a strengths keeper?
Anyone.
Yes, anyone. So I know that a lot of people will think that this is a job just for positive psychology practitioners who are like therapists or coaches or counselors, but really you don't need to be an expert to be a strengths keeper. And in fact, that's what's important about it. This idea that you can learn as you go. Your job is not necessarily to be the strengths expert, but rather your job is to be the person who is devoted to the strengths in your community, to be the person who does not let people forget that they have strengths, that they can share with one another, and to see the strengths in one another. And so it's really not about being an expert. There's so many great resources and ideas to help you learn. What's important really is just that you're willing to make sure it gets done. The same way you would raise your hand and say, oh yeah, I can be the timekeeper. You know, I can be the scorekeeper. There's another keeper. There's so many keepers in our society. It's a job that you can step into and grow. It's more important that someone is doing it than that person be an expert. And so here's some of those things here on this slide. You know, it's really anyone who cares about helping the people they care about, stay focused on personal and collective strengths, it can be, I think it's important to say, kids and teens and adults can be strengths keepers. And back to what we talked about earlier, the really important thing is remembering that it's a job in and of itself, and so it should be treated as a separate role and respected as that role. I'll just move forward. So we talked about a lot of the why, the what, the who. So here's some of the how. So how do you begin strengths keeping? Well, strengths keeping is an art, and so that's where the art in the title came from, the art and urgency of strengths keeping. But it's based on science, and so it's all about using these proven evidence-based practices that we get from character strengths, but there's no one right thing you have to do to get started. The best way to begin, though, is just to begin. It's more about consistency, more about making sure that in your community, in your family, in your committee, your team, your organization, that strengths is not that one and done activity that you do as an icebreaker at the beginning of the year or as that one team building exercise, but that it's something that you keep bringing people's attention back to. You know, having a strengths question at every moment, at every meeting, spotlighting someone's strengths, asking people, making sure everyone takes the VIA survey, and that people know each other's strengths, you know, keeping a chart of strengths. There's so many great activities that people can do. Another lesson learned from PTA is that people always have time for fun. And so the same person that tells you they do not have time to come to your 30-minute or 45-minute meeting about something that needs to get done has time to come to the cookie break or the pizza gathering because it's fun. That's not to put people down. We have a lot going on, and sometimes we're overwhelmed. I go back to a story from when my daughter was little, when she explained to me that she had different buckets inside of her, in her tummy, and that sometimes her vegetable bucket, it's very small, and it would get full, but her dessert bucket was still, you know, there, open, ready to be filled. And it was also a much bigger bucket than the vegetable bucket. And so that's the way we all are. So make things fun. It's not about having these super serious sessions with people all the time. It is about finding fun ways, fun activities that can be incorporated into what people are already doing. There's so many great resources already out there for people. The ones I keep like close to me on my table, I've got, you know, the power of character strengths and character strengths interventions. There's some great awesome tools by Dr. Ryan Nemec. And I love this book, 30 Days of Character Strengths. There are so many great activities that if you're acting as a strengths keeper in your organization, in your family, just doing some of these things so that you don't even have to think of everything. And that's also on All Our Strengths. Can't forget to mention my own site, but that's part of what my mission is to keep giving you fun ideas and fun activities, ways to keep this alive. You know, strengths keeping, I think, is a little bit coaching, a little bit facilitating, a little bit activity director, a little bit event planning. You know, all of those strengths can come into play. You're just trying to find memorable, fun ways to keep strengths alive so that people keep paying attention and growing this way.
First of all, I love the idea that we have a vegetable bucket
Yeah.
and a dessert bucket.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. That was your daughter?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think she must have inherited that from me because I find that my own dessert bucket is seems to be way bigger than my vegetable bucket too. So, you know.
Well, and then Diane said, my chocolate bucket is always partially empty.
Yeah.
And I hear you say that humor, having humor and making things fun. In one of our calls, we talked about with Michael Kimber doing fundraisers, right?
Yeah.
Instead of
Yeah.
fundraisers. But I was really curious about this, about, keeping a chart, planning activities, and doing activities so that it isn't just like, oh, I've done the character strengths. I remember the first time I did this, and maybe some people are like this on the call. I did my character strength survey, and then it stayed in the drawer for like a year.
Yeah.
I didn't apply it.
Absolutely.
I didn't even know what to do with it. So
Mm-hmm.
this is really, really helpful.
Exactly. So this is that idea that for pretty much any of the important things that we do in life, I mean, no one shows you the alphabet one time, right? And so it's really about, it's something that you keep going back to. And, if you're a teacher, you teach the same concepts over and over in different ways, and just to keep bringing it to life. And even when we go back to the same topic, when we revisit it through different activities, we learn something new. Every time I go to one of these lunch and learns, or so many of the great workshops and resources that are out there, I learn something new. Even though I've read so many books about strengths and done, so many trainings and have a lot of passion for the subject, I still always come back with something new. And so, we have to keep things fresh for people. The same way our restaurants will come out with a, spring menu, or these donuts are available for a limited time only. And so really you have to do a little bit of that as a strengths keeper too. Just you're keeping it fresh for people so that they think about it again.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could give us an example of asking strength-based questions.
Yeah. So what's a great a strengths-based question? It could just be, what strength would you like to be known for? We did that at my daughter's middle school, asking kids, and that, in fact, it can be fun to ask a question like that before people do the survey, uh, and then let them compare what they picked to what their results are. But it doesn't have to be complicated. Which strength do you think the world needs more of? Usually it's going to be one that's one of your signature strengths, and why do you think that? So those are just some easy examples. What strength, tell me about one of your strengths how it showed up in you when you were a child. That could be an example. And so there
These
are
are
all
great.
kinds of
Yeah.
ways you can just think about strengths or encourage people to have these conversations. And if it's not already on our site, I'll add it. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah. Do you want to
But
take
we
a
have,
drink? We can take a break and you can take a little drink of water if you need it.
oh, and I will have some water. But we
Yeah.
have, I'll make sure it's posted if it's not already posted. Some great, like 7 great conversations to have about strengths. And, you could just take one of those and have people talk about it one-on-one with each other, and then come back and share. Or it's just something, you could be a strengths keeper not only for an existing group, you could also bring a circle together and say, we're going to do these exercises together, or let's, every time we meet, have one of these conversations.
I was thinking we could write in the chat and ask people, what strength would you like to be known for? Again, different than what strengths you have. Let's just populate the chat and ask everybody that question. All right. Strength would you love and learning? All right, Carol.
Yay, that's one of my signature strengths.
Kindness, creativity, great. Yeah, keep them coming. Curiosity, gratitude,
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
helping other people. Zest,
Absolutely.
appreciation of beauty and excellence, focus, empowering others.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. I
Mm-hmm.
know you have a few more slides too, right? We're gonna, and
Oh,
then I have a bunch of questions.
I just saw my cousin's name in the chat.
Oh,
Hi,
nice.
Julie.
Gratitude, love of learning, team player, kindness, loyalty. Oh, I like empowering others. That's a good one. Yeah, it is a good one. Yeah, and you feel free to borrow and say, yeah, I
Oh,
want that
yeah,
too.
absolutely. Oh, this
Fairness.
is fun. I'm seeing lots of wonderful names in the chat and lots of wonderful strengths. Hi, Diane. So
Fairness.
I'm wondering, let's see, what else should I tell you? This is wonderful to see what people want to be known for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to make sure you get to your proud mama slide, as I think,
Shameless braggart that I am. Okay.
well, and I also think because it's relevant for what's happening right now,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So I'm going to just hop back to the slides. Um, okay, so we talked about how do you begin strengths keeping? Remember that people always have time for fun. Now, it could be because humor is one of my signature strengths. Maybe that is true for people who have that strength. I'm like, I want it to be fun. And so maybe if prudence was a higher strength, maybe I would not need things to be fun. But I think that's kind of common in humanity. So, when should we practice strengths keeping? So this is where we get to the other part of the title of this workshop. It was called The Art of Strength and Urgency of Strengths Keeping. And so going into the section, I picked two quotes I wanted to share to get us thinking about the urgency of what I feel is the urgency of strengths keeping. And so one of them is from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and it's amazing, you know, these words come from the 1960s, but they feel like they were written yesterday. These are revolutionary times. All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems. Oops, I went back too far. Let me go back one. Old systems of exploitation and oppression, and out of the wombs of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is no time for apathy and complacency. And again, because I am here in Atlanta, I'm a native Georgian from Covington, Georgia, live in Atlanta, Decatur area. So I feel a special pride in Congressman John Lewis, who I know, of course, is a national hero. But right now, as we are here, that service, his funeral service is happening here in Atlanta. And so that's very much on my heart and mind. And so these words really resonate with me today in particular. We all live in the same house. We all must be part of the effort to hold down our little house. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, do something about it. Say something. Have the courage, have the backbone, get in the way, walk with the wind. It's all going to work out. And I emphasized from Martin Luther King the fierce urgency of now. I really think that's something that many of us are feeling right now as we live our lives in the midst of this global pandemic, as we see the impact, the heightened impact of systemic racism during this pandemic. the ongoing issue that we face collectively as humanity with climate change, so many things, so many pressing things that really rely upon our ability to be able to cooperate and collaborate in a way that we never have before. And one of the reasons I think strengths keeping as a practice is so important, because we have to have a consistent, reliable way of calling out the best in each other, of seeing the good in one another, of helping people develop positive relationships and be able to create the trust that they need in order to work together. And as we've been talking about during this entire session, that's really what strengths keeping is about, creating that practice, not unlike housekeeping. And so that's kind of a tie-in to the quote from John Lewis about holding down our little house. Strengths keeping is a way for us to take care of our house wherever we are, whatever we call that, whether it's our team, our community, our family. How are we consistently facilitating positive relationships, helping people call out the good in each other, so that we can face these challenges? That is just the starting place for beginning to work together. There's another wonderful quote from the iconic, African-American author James Baldwin, something along the lines of, not everything, I think I might be misquoting it, but to sum it up, it's not everything that can be faced, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And strengths keeping, seeing strengths in one another, is part of helping us be able to face things together. It's really important that we be able to face things together and to have that trust in one another. And so this is part of the reason that I feel passionately that this is a time for strengths keepers and strengths keeping, that this is not something that we need to hope happens, but this is something that we really need to facilitate happening. This practice of this active, proactive practice of developing, identifying, using strengths. So to get to go back, and I'll have to share my proud mama moment that relates to this. Advance the slides. It takes Zoom just a minute sometimes to catch up. So I said, when should we practice strengths keeping? Short answer, now. To extend upon that answer, especially now, as together we face this pandemic, systemic racism, climate change. I mean, how's that for the short list, right? This is that time for us to be able to see and summon the good in one another. And so our call to action, where will we be the strengths keepers? John Lewis's quote talked about, holding down your little house. Where is your little house? Where is that place where you're going to help the people in that place see their strengths, share their strengths with each other? How can you help make sure that strengths keeping is happening where you are? Is that in your organization? Is that in your child's school? Or maybe you're a teen or a kid, and maybe you can plant these seeds in your school by being a strengths keeper. These pictures here, speaking of strengths, so the child in green standing next to Congressman Lewis is my daughter. And on the other side is her lifelong best friend. They were born the same summer. We were neighbors. And so we went to this march, this historic march, and Sophia and Addie wanted to see John Lewis. And as I explained, prudence is not my signature strength, but when you're a mom in a crowd of 30,000 people, you get very prudent, whether it's your signature strength or not. And so I wisely advised them that it was unrealistic to think that they would meet Congressman Lewis at a march, and that the best course of action was to stick with me, and maybe we'll be able to step outside of the march and grab a photo at least. They would have that. And so they did not listen to me. One of my daughter's signature strengths, they've shuffled around some, but bravery is one of her signature strengths. And so they listened. I thought they agreed that we would stick together, but instead they just kept letting the space between us grow wider and wider. And I lost them in this crowd. And so where I found them eventually, after much panic, was at the front of the march. And so as it turned out, they had made their way forward just by tapping each person on the back and just saying, "Excuse me, we're trying to get to the front to meet John Lewis. We want to see John Lewis." And person after person kindly let them through until they got all the way to the front. And there was a kind woman right behind John Lewis who, when they asked her, she said, "Well, I want to help you do that too," and pushed them forward. And next thing you know, they were right there, linking arms and walking the rest of the march arm in arm. And it was like one of those highlight experiences of life. A version of that picture is actually in the Time Magazine tribute this week. I didn't even know that at first. But just a reminder of what can happen when people act on their strengths. And the other cool thing about that moment is that it turned out they had no idea who it was who let them through to him right at the end, but it turns out the woman that let them through is now the same woman, Nakima Williams, who is going to be taking his place in his congressional seat. So there's just all kinds of history wrapped up in that moment. So that is kind of my proud mama moment, and just an example of even when we are strengths coaches, encouraging people to follow that passion and act on their strengths, sometimes we're also like, but not right now. And so, but I think it's a call to action for all of us to really bring our strengths out into the world in service of helping other people stay focused on theirs.
Absolutely. And what I love about it is because, of course, our hearts are with John Lewis right now, and wanting to be, part of that memorial and honor him and his commitment. And we had a moment right now of doing that.
Yeah.
So I thank you. I thank you for that. Because there's many ways to do it, right?
Yeah,
there's a strength. There's many ways to honor someone's memory, and so we've just done that.
Well,
which is
thank
really
you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that, Martin Luther King, the words we associate with him, this "I have a dream," and so it's so important for us each of us to think about what our dream is for the world, and think about how our strengths can help create that reality. And so when I tie this back to strengths keeping, one of my dreams, I think about, how kids, when they decide they're going to start a club, and we've all done it, I'm sure, as kids, oh, we're going to make our own club. We already know, oh, I'm going to be the president. I'm going to be the secretary. No, I'm going to be the president. And so I'm dreaming of a world in which when kids come together and make up those clubs, that they say, who's going to be the strengths keeper? Because it's that common. It's that the idea that we need to pay attention to strengths when we're trying to work together would be that common and built into our culture that our kids know, that they have already picked up on. That's what you do when you're trying to work together to create something good. And so I hope we can really all be a part of creating that kind of future in our organizations, where it just becomes part of what we do to say, who's going to be the strengths keeper? who's going to make sure, who's going to be keeping track of strengths, who's got the, and that it's not even a big deal of you're the timekeeper, you're the strengths keeper, okay, go. The same way that we do about so many other things that we say and believe to be important.
I wanted to go back to something that you were talking about in terms of, collaboration and cooperation, especially at this time.
Yeah.
And how you were talking about that strengths keeping was a way to create trust.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about this in a lot of conversations that I've been in when we've been talking about racial injustice and how to bridge the gap. And it seems to me that you're suggesting that this is a way to start doing that. Can you talk more about that?
Well, when we see strengths in people, in one another, we appreciate people. Sometimes even a behavior that we interpret negatively, when we see it as an example of someone using their strength, then we see that strength in a different way. So I'm one of those people. So creativity is also one of, my signature strengths. And I get excited about things, new ideas. And so you bring me a new idea and I'm most likely going to say, yes, we should do that. Unless, of course, you're my kid and you want to get away from me in a 30,000 person march. But in a lot of other spaces, I would be like, that's a great idea. We should do that. And I came to realize that I need people with prudence around me. For example, before I started appreciating the strength of prudence, I might see those people as wet blankets raining on my parade, because often it's the person with the character strength of prudence who's going to be like, do we have the money to do that? Is that in the budget? Exactly whose job is it going to be? All those complicated questions, right, that have to come after the yes. And so if you just stay in that space of just, oh, this is great, this is wonderful, then you can have a negative experience of that person who's asking you to stop and say more about the details. And so when you reframe that through a character strength lens and say, oh, thank goodness this person is exhibiting prudence, and to balance off this, zest and creativity that I was, leaning into. And that begins to create trust, because I'm appreciating you for what you are bringing into this this interaction, as opposed to judging you negatively or seeing it as a weakness or a fault. And so I think those are the ways that we can begin. That's just one of the ways that we use strengths to deepen our relationships and develop trust, because we trust people who like us too. We like people who like us, and seeing people's strengths helps you like them, and so being reminded of what there is to appreciate in someone and seeing them through that positive lens of strength is such an amazing tool for developing positive relationships and creating trust. Because you say, I know where this person is coming from. I mean, the example I just used, they're not judging me or trying to poke holes in my idea. They're exercising some prudence and helping me think about, how to make this work.
Brings gratitude right in there, right? The mother of all the virtues.
Absolutely.
And so effective. Marnie was asking, so how do we use our character strengths to heal systemic racism?
Oh, an easy question for the end.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you can take a stab at it, or we can say, wouldn't that be?
Well, so I feel so blessed because I was asked to take a stab at a similar theme in a recent conversation on VIA's United in Strengths calls. And so the video is out there for a little bit of a longer answer. And maybe we can put that link out there. But a very short answer, and so that came out of that conversation that I had with Ryan Nemec was just strengths in part, I think, prepare us to do this difficult work together. So it's a tool in our toolbox is one of the main things I would say, because we are going to need all of the character strengths that we have to tackle something that's so entrenched in our society. We need to be able to see good in one another. We need to be able, our strengths are basically our tools for cooperating and collaborating, and what job is more challenging and what job is going to require more coordination and collaboration than challenging something like systemic racism and trying to turn that around. And so I really, one of the primary things I see is that it's that tool that enables us to be able to work together, to build the trust with one another so that we can do hard things together. Because even though I have, emphasized the fun and the positive parts of it, because nobody comes when you invite them to something hard and challenging, but having that positive foundation in our relationships, being able to relate to each other and have that positive place we can continue to get back to is what enables us to do something difficult and hard together. And I think we all agree, no matter where you stand, that tackling systemic racism is tough and hard,
Absolutely. And what I love, I don't know if I can say this, but it feels to me like the strengths are colorblind. It doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
well, they're universal, and
they're universal.
And so I think part of what we it's not that we don't want to be colorblind. We want to see that strengths are in every color, and so we want to see color. We want to respect the history and the experiences that people have endured because of their color and what's been projected onto that. But we want to realize the universality of those strengths in every aspect of humanity. Because again, that's so much of what racism and really any ism takes away from us. We start to look at those people as, oh, we know what they're about. We know who they are. We don't see individuals, we see categories, and we think we know what those categories are about. And so strengths bring us back to looking and saying, gosh, she, has a love of learning. She has leadership. He has such a sense of fairness or bravery, and not just see a Black person. So you see where I'm going with that?
Yes, I do. And I think it's really important. And thank you for that clarification. It's an important one.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of the universality of the body, the human body.
Yeah.
And that, like, we all have fingerprints, but our
Mm-hmm.
fingerprints are unique.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have these,
mm-hmm.
right? We all have a heart, but the heartbeat is unique, unless of course you have a pacemaker and then they're regulating that.
Right.
But there, when we start to look at it in a different way, there are lessons from our nature. There
Mm-hmm.
are lessons from, and that's what, values in action. And didn't Chris Peterson say other people matter?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
For those of you that know, and he along with Martin Seligman sort of started this whole research into character strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I have been I would love everyone to strength spot our beautiful guest today. If you just put in the chat what you see, the strengths that you see right now, I would love you to get a little bit of reinforcement for the work that you're doing. Certainly creativity for me. I see zest. I see profound intelligence. I see passion for and deep wisdom. I see wisdom, and I see global impact, like that you are really looking to make an impact on a global level. And so everyone, if you would put in the chat what strengths you see in Sonya, that would be great.
Hi, Ruth. I see Ruth Pierce there in the chat. And I've been so lucky to get to connect with Ruth and Ryan over at VIA. And so, and really having that opportunity to participate in that United in Strengths community, and led to being able to be a part of this. And I've admired the work of Wholebeing Institute for so long. So it's just wonderful how we're all, as a community of people who really care about this, trying to put our collective strengths out in the world. It's lovely. And JCC Manhattan, it's just wonderful.
Hospitality, generosity. You should run in politics. Hi, Sonya from Ruth Pierce. Love, love, love Sonya's energy and level, credibility on strengths. This meeting has been super helpful. Honesty, hope, leadership, appreciation, wisdom, creativity, zest, kindness, ever so important, non-judgmental. Here's a link to the UAS recording of Sonya's session. Oh, thank you so much for providing that, Ruth. Leadership, positivity, influencing others. And then speaking of that, I wanted to just let you know that
everyone's so kind. It almost hurts, doesn't it, when people tell us like, say some bad things right away, please, please.
No. Part of that is receiving, right?
Yeah, I know. We have to practice what we preach.
I know, and it's really tricky.
I'll do the strength spotting, okay?
Yeah, but you know what? That's part of, I think, part of strength keeping too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is making sure that we receive that in, because when we receive that energy in, then we have the strength to carry on. When we savor our successes, when we say that, wait, I am proud in this moment because I have done something. Then we have the energy and the strength to go on. And because everything is so urgent, and because the work that you're doing is so important, we want to fortify you and make sure that you'll have the strength to continue. Because as we know, life brings about challenge. We don't have to go looking for it.
I know. Why do we even bother not getting along with each other? I mean, it's like viruses and hurricanes and earthquakes. Aren't we busy enough? You would
it's
think.
It's a very, very good point. Next week, everybody, Louisa Carter, entrepreneur and chief happiness officer on service learning, is going to be talking about charity and philanthropy. And on Thursday, Shakti Tikun, a psychologist and teacher of SEL on VIA and teens interventions and tools for working with social and emotional learning, will be here as well. Sonya, thank you for creating a lunch and learn experience that has just been so unique, so important, and so relevant, and also giving us the opportunity to collectively honor John Lewis in such a special and personal way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I will just put the website address for all our strengths up real quick, if I can.
Of course.
Well, we'll see. I don't know if it's going to let me. I was going to just switch to the last one. There it is. So it's allourstrengths.com. And if some of the resources I mentioned aren't up, we'll get them up, and so that you can have them and start strengths keeping wherever you are.
Awesome. And everyone, please remember to take care of yourselves, to breathe, and to keep coming back to our Zoom unity, our Zoom Lunch and Learn community, and we will see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.